challenger, Alexander Volkanovski!
Hey guys, my name is Jordan Sullivan. I'm a dietitian to UFC featherweight champion Alexander the Great Volkanovski, and today we're going to be talking about everything that Volkanovski eats during camp. So the first thing that we get the guys to do is we send him to what's called a DEXA scan. And what a DEXA scan is you pretty much sit in a big MRI-like machine, and it assesses your lean body mass, your body fat, and it tells us exactly how much fat you have on your body in grams, and that's what we want to manipulate in camp. So we do a body fat assessment, we figure out where he's at, where he needs to be when he goes into fight week, and then we can schedule in how many calories he needs to eat every single day to make sure that he's losing the right amount of fat every week heading into that fight week. The next part of that is we have to put him in a calorie deficit to lose that fat. And so we have to find out what his resting metabolic rate is. And so what we do, we're very lucky again, we have access to some really cool equipment where Volk will go in and he'll get his resting metabolic rate test done. And that pretty much tells us how many calories per day Volk's burning at rest. And then on top of that, what we need to account for is his crazy training schedule during fight camp. So we can use some activity multipliers, do some little maths, and then we can figure out how many calories per day Volk is burning. But then I go back to his body composition. I go, okay, we need to lose X amount of fat per this many weeks. I know I need to put him in a 5, 10, 15, 20% calorie deficit, and then we can start structuring his diet from there. So once we get all of that data, what we do is we obviously need to design Volk's diet. So we do this by breaking down his macronutrient intake. So there's a couple principles that are really important when you're considering a UFC fighter, let alone a UFC champion. So the activity that these guys do and the training that these guys do is what we call highly glycolytic. And what that means is that we rely on a lot of carbohydrates to fuel the activity. So carbohydrates make up a lot of his diet. The way that we assign these numbers is that we use a principle, it's called a 3-2-1 principle, where we assign 2 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein. So we keep his protein really, really high during camp. That helps with maintaining his muscle mass while we're losing his fat mass. And then we also assign 1 gram per kilogram of fat to his diet. And because fat isn't as necessarily as needed for the training that he's doing, that's what we can manipulate each week during camp if we need to keep moving that weight down south. And then what we do once we figure out the total amount of calories that Volk needs, we assign the rest of the calories to carbohydrates. As I said, very, very important. And we need Volk to be having lots and lots of carbs. So everyone that says low carb diets are good for fighters, completely wrong picture. Essentially, Volk will be eating anywhere between 6 to 7 meals. As soon as we wake up, first meal, he starts his day with a homemade smoothie that we use with a bit of a protein shake. So we'll throw in some skim milk there. Again, keep that fat nice and low, good natural carbohydrates in there. Add in some really nice protein powder that digests really well in his gut. We'll add some fruit in there, and he'll also have a side of, say, pancakes or pikelets or another carbohydrate source. We'll put some natural honey on there or some maple syrup. Again, keeping those carbohydrates really high. We like to keep the fiber quite low at this meal because he's obviously going to go off to training. We don't want too much gurgling in his stomach. Then he'll go off to his first training session, and on the way to that first training session, I'll get him to have another snack, another carbohydrate snack, whether that looks like oat bar or some pikelets or a little muffin or some orange juice, just some high carbohydrates to top up his blood sugars before he goes into training. So Alex will obviously then go into training. He'll train for about 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on what the session is. So he's burnt a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of energy during that session. After that, we'll have meal number 3. So he weighs himself after his training, figures out how much fluid he lost. We put the fluid back in, we put the electrolytes in, and then he has his first really big meal of the day. And what we'll do is we'll have a very high carbohydrate meal to replace the glycogen that we lost out. Not always chicken and rice, but we can have some chicken or quinoa, we could have some lamb, or we can have some nice fish, some white fish like barramundi, or if we've got a higher fat day, we might have some salmon. Always fresh produce, lots of natural meats. And then again, lots of carbohydrate sources. The carb sources can look like rice, quinoa, couscous, pasta, bread, wraps. Doesn't really matter. We don't discriminate as long as he's getting the carbohydrates in. And then Alex will generally have a bit more of a rest in the afternoon, and he'll have his second session around 3-4 p.m. in the afternoon. But again, we do like to get another snack in. So meal number 4 is another high carbohydrate, high protein snack. That'll usually look like something like high protein chocolate milk with some raisin toast, rice cakes, banana and Nutella, or honey or peanut butter. Those high carbohydrate foods to support his training. Alex again will go off and he'll do another probably 1 to 2.5 hour session depending on what the day is. And then after that meal, we have a post-training meal. That'll either look like a fish and vegetable with a little bit of carbohydrates. Again, really good to get those healthy omegas in. Or if it's a lower intensity day, what we'll do is just a afternoon protein shake. We'll make it up at home. Alex will generally rest and go hang out with the family for a while, but I still want to get a couple more meals in with him. So then around dinner time, we have his 6th meal, which again is his meal prep that'll come in. This meal will all depend on what he's doing the next day and the next morning for his training, whether we put in a lot of carbohydrates or we just have a moderate amount of carbohydrates. Again, we're going to be looking at lean protein sources. If we're lucky and we've got some fresh there, we might even throw some fresh kangaroo in there cooked up as well. So it's all really nice, all marinated with lots of good sauces, and very, very different from what the chicken and broccoli that you see a lot of fighters eating. And then the last thing that Alex will have is I give him a bit of dessert at the end of the night. I'm not a big believer at all in just cutting out all the fun foods. The amount of calories these guys burning throughout their day, throughout their training sessions, there's absolutely no reason that they can't have a bit of chocolate here, a bit of ice cream, or a couple of lollies. I think it's important. Yes, it definitely fits in their calorie count, but it is also really important psychologically that they don't cut those foods out for weeks and months on end, because no one likes doing that and you get a lot of enjoyment out there. So 7 meals all up throughout the day. The way we structure those meals are kind of undulating, and they periodize throughout the week depending what his demands are for training. So we'll have some high days, we'll have some low days. And by the end of the week, we're just aiming to hit a certain calorie amount, like I said earlier, so we can meet that weight loss goal for that week, so we can slowly bring his weight down coming into fight week, and then get him into fight week feeling really good, fueling up, not being restrictive, and going in there like a UFC champ. There are a select few performance supplements that I absolutely love and I think bring a lot of value, and I've seen a lot of value with Alex. So the very first one that we do is a very high quality protein powder. Once you break down the amount of protein that you see someone needs in these diets and you work out the mass, you realize that's a lot of chicken breast to eat. So just out of pure convenience, having a really high quality protein powder is really important for him. The second supplement that I love using now is beta-alanine. What beta-alanine is an amino acid that you take prior to working out, and it's an endurance buffer. What it does is that it helps remove the hydrogen atom that contributes to building up lactic acid in our muscle. So it helps us exercise harder for longer. So I love the guys taking beta-alanine twice a day, and Volk will take it before his workout, because anyone that's taken it or has taken pre-workout will understand the feeling that you get when you get beta-alanine in your system. And it's kind of like that tingly feeling you get all around your body, like you've got spiders crawling up. So I like to call beta-alanine, it's the pre-workout that you can take without all the rubbish of other pre-workouts, but you still get the really good buzz from it. The other thing that we make use of is probably the most widely used supplement in the world, and that's caffeine. And I think we all love taking caffeine, but for combat sports, it's super, super important, because you think of how much concentration these guys need, the mental aptitude and the cognition they need during training, especially when you think of those longer training sessions. Caffeine's really important for not just his endurance, but his mental reaction time and mental concentration. So we make sure before workouts we're getting a good amount of caffeine, usually about 3 to 5 milligrams per kilogram. And when you work out what that is per body weight, it's quite a lot. We tend to keep that more so for the morning sessions, and then the early afternoon, if he for whatever reason does a late night session, we relax on the caffeine just to preserve the quality of his sleep. The other thing that we'll use is some intra-workout carbohydrates. I don't know how many times I need to say this, but combat sports use a lot of carbohydrate. It's the main energy source. It's the primary source. If you want to get your best performance and have a peak performance in combat sports, you need to have a consistent supply of carbohydrates, especially for those big sessions where you're doing fight simulation, you're doing sparring, you're doing wrestling, you're doing those live sessions. You need to make sure that you're fueling up those blood sugars so your muscles can work at optimal capacity for the time that you need them to. So intra-workout carbs are really important. The last thing that we do, and probably a supplement that's really underappreciated, is electrolytes. And I think we can all appreciate when we do a training session how much we sweat and how much water we lose, but we may not always appreciate what's being lost in that water. And a lot of that is electrolytes, being sodium a big one. So what we do with Volk, who works out, up to 4 to 5 to 6 hours a day, not only is he sweating a lot of fluid, he's losing a lot of electrolytes as well. So we need to make sure that he's replacing them before and after each session. And then so when he gets to his later sessions, he's going in there, he's rehydrated, he's got enough salts in his systems, his muscles can function properly, mentally he's in a good spot, and he's in the best spot after training to make sure he's recovering. If you guys want to follow along and see some more of our work, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Fight Dietitian. That is _Fight Dietitian. You can go to our YouTube page, you can type in Jordan Sullivan and find the Fight Dietitian page over there as well.